Hi, good afternoon and welcome. My name is Dan Pachowski. I'm a director of community leadership programs at the Detroit Regional Chamber. And really excited that you're joining us today on a beautiful Tuesday. Wonderful day out there, pre-fall day. We're here to talk about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, a very timely and important issue here in the community and in the region. A reminder that participants, you can submit questions during the conversation via the chat box on the right side of your computer screen. We'll monitor that chat box, and towards the end of the conversation, we'll take some of your questions and engage Mark with some of your questions along the way. So here we go. So we're really excited about having Mark Lee here. He's the CEO and president of the Lee Group, independent integrated marketing and consulting firm focused on providing marketing, branding, communication solutions to clients. You might know Mark from Small Talk with Mark S. Lee. It was a column that appeared in the Chronicle, and now it's via blog on Cranes. He currently hosts In the Conference Room with Mark S. Lee, which airs on 910 Superstation. And we were just chatting about it. He's now in his 8th year of teaching at college. So right after this session, he's off to, as an adjunct professor, to teach a class at Eastern Michigan. So Mark, welcome to the conversation, and glad to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to have this critical conversation.
You betcha. Let's move right ahead. So it's this conversation is not necessarily a new conversation, right? So conversations around inclusion, conversations on racial justice, we certainly in this region, we've had them in the past. But this time, I think it's different. And I think you might agree with me. And if so, how do you think it's different, Mark, this time around?
This time, Dan, it's really been thrusted into the forefront. For obvious reasons. There's clearly a very strong social movement that's taking place across the country that actually goes back 3 or 4 years with various situations that have happened nationally. And most recently with the George Floyd situation and other situations that have happened, it's really brought this conversation back to the forefront. And I think, it's essential that we have this conversation for a couple of reasons. One, as you and I were talking before today's conversation, the question is very simple. Why are we still having it? And what I mean by that is this goes back. And if you can just give me a chance to give you a couple of examples to help level set where we are. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One is from 1984 and a couple are from 2020, which talks about why we need to have this conversation. So back in 1984, there was a young man, I apologize, who was a newly hired, or a student, a fresh out of graduate school, a newly hired employee. And he went into a conference room and they were taking pictures. So the organization hired a photographer to take pictures. And so that young man walks in, sits off to the side because he was brand new into the organization. The photographer says, oh no, they were sidebar. He said, we need to get you in that picture. You need to join the conversation and join the picture. And the person says, okay, but then he also heard on the sidebar, the person said, well, we got to have a black guy in this picture. And so the person got up and left and said, I'm not going to be anyone's token in that picture. That was 1984. And that person was me. Now let's go to 2020 and give you another example that just happened within the last week or so. There was a meeting. I'm not going to say where. I'm not going to identify the organization, obviously. We never do that. But a diversity trainer was invited to talk to some leaders of a major organization about this very topic. And she was invited to talk about it. And someone looked at her point blank and said, you know what, we're not going to talk about it all. You've been hired to come here and talk about it because, quite frankly, you're the racist and we're not. Whoa, in a business environment. And then the last example I want to give you from 2020, just last week, not in Michigan, across the country, there was a major meeting where, for example, people were talking about marketing materials and presenting information to consumers. So the person sitting at the table said, well, you know what? Let's just swap out the white faces in the picture and just replace them with black pictures. black faces in the picture. Isn't that amazing? And so that shows you the level of I guess the length of work we still have to do. One example is from 1984. Here we are in 2020, and it just shows you that we have to continue to address this issue openly and candidly.
Yeah, it's powerful. You know, so it's no secret, and I think you just pointed out, it's been a long-standing challenge. You know, we're Detroit's predominantly black city, the suburbs, surrounding suburbs less. So let me dig a little deeper. What's at the core? I mean, what do we sort of peel away the onion here? Like, what's really going on? You know, you hear, well, there's, you know, there are not enough people that apply, so on and so forth. You sort of hear the rhetoric, but really at the core, what do you think's going on with this challenge?
You have built-in attitudes, quite frankly, that people just simply believe, and people have accepted those attitudes as the norm. And you hear some people will say, you know, systemic racism or this or that, but I believe it's really a fundamental as it relates to people's attitudes. And when it comes to working with people, people are comfortable working with people that look like them, and they're comfortable hiring people that look like them. So in our region, yes, Detroit is 80% African American, and also it's a very diverse city, has a very strong Hispanic population amongst others. The metropolitan area, Detroit is 23% African American, again, with other strong segments of the population. Across the state of Michigan is 14%, nearly 14% African American. So some of the challenges that we're still having going way back, Detroit has been a segregated region years ago. And while it's improved over the years, some of those fundamental attitudes are still there. And I think that's what we're still seeing, is that some people refuse to change. They refuse to change their attitudes. And some people are bringing that into their place of employment, their place of socialization, whatever it might be. And I think that's driving some of the challenges that we're still seeing today here in 2020.
Yeah. So yeah, and you talked about decision making and challenging decision making, and you sort of get into a comfort zone. And so it's really it's about not so much about numbers, but about including individuals and perspectives in the decision making. That's what I hear so many, you know, black professionals saying. It's about having a seat at the table.
Absolutely.
And being a part of that decision making process that will, and having sort of the culture and the environment where, okay, we have to take that perspective into consideration.
Couldn't agree more. In fact, as you talk about that, many people in this city maybe they don't know that I'm the son of a legendary banker in this city.
Yeah.
And many of the African American bankers here in Detroit are here as a direct result of my father and his ability to give back into the community. He was fortunate enough to sit at the table, and he brought other people along to the table with him. And let me simplify this conversation for you, Dan. You make an excellent point. Diversity really is kind of getting the invitation, right? And it's a representation of people. Inclusion is kind of getting that invitation to the table. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're making decisions, but you're getting to the table. Equity is when you're brought to the table, and then you've got those opportunities. You have the ability then to make decisions and make recommendations that affect change. And that's the difference between those three. We hear diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of the things that my father was able to do that he's instilled to me is that he always told me, and many people may know his name was Aubrey W. Lee Sr. Again, I was a legendary banker here in Detroit. He always taught me you have to be at the table. And then when you get to the table, you have to try as much as you can, bring other people to the table, because a business will only be strengthened when you have different points of view, different attitudes, different mindsets at the table to help drive change and strategic direction for an organization.
Right. You know, I met your father as we were talking, and what an incredible, gracious man. And equally as important is the individuals that I know he shaped, and the stories of individuals that were shaped and really encouraged by your father. It's quite a legacy. It's a legacy that I hope that anybody that's doing the work like you're doing the work would hope to someday share. Let me just shift a little bit. You know, you're in the media marketing business. We've seen we see no shortage of organizations sort of putting out statements and proclamations.
Hmm.
You know, and so just talk about those a little bit. Talk about that process. Talk about what do you think's got to happen in conjunction with a statement or proclamation, and what are the challenges and opportunities?
You have to be careful with the commitment statements. You have to be careful with how you use the commitment videos. And let me give you some real life examples here as to why I say that. The intent is good. All right, the intention is good. The words are good, but the actual actions, that's what makes it more difficult. So, for example, right after the whole George Floyd situation, organizations were jumping and saying, we're committed to diversity, we're committed to this, we want the right people at the table. We start getting e-blasts. All right, so here's an example. I got an e-blast. Again, I'm not going to identify any organization. It was wonderful. It was a great commitment statement, and it said all the right things, had all the buzzwords in there, so to speak, okay? So I decided to go ahead and go to the website, and I wanted to see if the actions, in fact, were consistent with the words. They were not. There was a huge gap there. So right there's the example where my gut reaction was, the intent was good, but it was almost as if it was a knee-jerk reaction. And what organizations have to do before you jump and start putting out these commitment statements, Dan, look at your internal organization. Be introspective. Make sure that you're practicing what you're preaching. And in the commitment video, it's the same thing. See, as we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not just with African Americans, I'm talking about all ethnicities, all individuals. Some people were feeling as though, okay, well, there's African American month, there's Black History Month, right? And so organizations will come and they'll give a check during that time of the year. No, that's not what it's about. What it means is you have to continue to invest in these different segments of the population 365 days of the year. You need to bring people to the table. Don't just put out a commitment statement, but Dan, you have to have a hard conversation. It has to be a real conversation to avoid with those three examples that I gave you at the beginning of this talk. And until we sit down and have those hard, thoughtful conversations, get your employees engaged, get the senior leadership engaged, don't sweep it under the table, we're going to continue to have this conversation. So while I get the intent of the commitment statements, make sure it's thoughtful, make sure that you're not over-promising and under-delivering, and quite frankly, make sure that it has a call to action that is focused on change, and not just a call to action to say we're going to do something, but yet there's a gap there that doesn't back up what you're saying at this point.
Yeah, no, with all due respect to sort of wordsmithing, you've got to have those internal. It's got to come from the culture of your organization. It has to be integral to the who you are as an organization for it to sort of carry its weight, because you can't pull it back, when it's out there. We were talking a little bit of. I do fully believe there's incredible diverse talent in this region. Incredible diverse talent. You get an organization that's wanting to diversify, and so just flip this, just that talent that's there. As employers, how should we be thinking about the way they're looking at our organizations? We always think we're in the control seat, right? We're going to flip the switch, and wouldn't everybody want to come to work for the chamber or whatever? But I don't think we put ourselves in their shoes in terms of what they're looking at. So what do you recommend, or what's your experience tell you?
I think I've been very fortunate in my career. I've been very blessed. I've gone to 2 outstanding institutions. I have multiple degrees. I have worked in fantastic organizations at the senior level positions, and each one of those positions, I try to put myself in the position of the person I'm trying to recruit. And I think that's the first step. Is we need to understand and have the empathy of people certainly looking to join the organization. I started this conversation by saying we're comfortable hiring people that will look like us. We're comfortable hiring people who went to the same schools that we went to. I went to #1 graduate school for a certain discipline in the entire country. Okay, I'm proud to say that. But I'm not just going to hire people from that institution either. I'm going to hire people that represents different institutions, different disciplines from across Metro Detroit, because you're right, we have so much talent here. Here's a quote that stuck out with me. I don't know who said it, but I think I was reading something this weekend. It says, quote, talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity is not. All right, I want to repeat that. Talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity is not. So we all have talent, but not everyone has the opportunity. So to answer your question, I think it's incumbent upon the organization to really understand the types of candidates that you want to recruit or attract. Number two, it's okay to broaden the recruiting pool. Look at different institutions. Get much more engaged with the HBCUs. Talented people down there. Get involved in other institutions. Send your people out there and talk to the students and really develop that empathy, understand what they're looking for in the organization. Because at the end of the day, just as if you're looking to hire individuals, those individuals are looking to work for an organization that's similar to their values. They're going to be evaluating and critiquing and asking questions about the organization as well. So it goes both ways, two-way street.
Yeah, they're savvy. I mean, I have 5 millennials, and I know they're savvy.
Yes, they are. I teach them every day.
They're savvy about where they're going to go, and in terms of what the match looks like for their organization. We're talking about organizations. Let's look at, we've got and you're in this space. You work with small business, you work with corporations, and you work with community-based organizations. Man, I'm telling and I've been out there with a lot of nonprofits, and sometimes they're in 2 different worlds. Is the approach different with in corporate within corporate structures versus community-based organizations? Sometimes I see both struggling in different ways.
Yeah, I think the fundamental issues are the same, quite frankly. Obviously corporations are for-profit and things like that. Yeah, community-based organizations might have a slightly different mission, but at the end of the day, it's about relationships. Yeah. It's about people. If I'm working for a nonprofit organization, if I'm looking to recruit, I'm still going to recruit the best person. And I still want to recruit a team that's a representation of the community it's going to serve. If you're a corporation, same thing. You're still going to look for the best people. And you're still going to hopefully identify a diverse team, a collection of people, thought, ideas, talent. That's a direct reflection of the organization, but it also represents the communities being served. Here's what we've done, Dan, is we've everything's been dummied down into race, right? So let me just give you another example. I recently wrote an article that was published in the Detroit Free Press, and the article was on this very topic. I said nothing about hiring one person over another person. I was simply laying out a strategic approach of how to have a team that's a representation of the community at large. In the comments section, someone said this: "Oh boy, here we go again. As a white Caucasian male, I guess this person, me, he's telling me I should not apply for those positions at all." And I read the article and I read the comments, and that was such a disconnect. So we've already jumped to preconceived notions as soon as we say diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my point is that goes back to the attitudinal challenge that we have, whether you're in a nonprofit, whether you're in a corporate space. We got to figure out how to break down those barriers and these preconceived notions, because that's not what we're saying. We're saying is let's implement strategies. Let's have a strategy-based approach that's going to help you to connect with different segments of the population on the for-profit and on the for-profit side as well.
Yeah, right. You work a lot with small businesses. You do a lot of specific work, and let's talk small business in this diversity inclusion. Do you think the fact that they're smaller, perhaps more nimble, is there a competitive advantage? There's a disadvantage? What are some of the unique challenges for small business in this space?
Well, quite frankly, the number one talent in this space, quite frankly, is still talent. The number one issue for small business owners is still this thing called talent. A lot of them still have a tendency to hire family members. They still have a tendency of hiring people that they know. And I'm not going to give you my perspective either way on that. That depends on your business needs. But when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think that entrepreneurs can be a little bit more nimble because they're smaller and
Yeah.
they certainly have relationships, not to imply that larger organizations don't. But I think that smaller businesses can be a little bit more nimble in this space. Therefore, that's an advantage. But a disadvantage is they still don't even understand in totality the impact that diversity can have on their business results. So there's a disadvantage. So from an entrepreneurial standpoint, like just as we're talking about businesses at large, you have to build the awareness. You have to educate yourself. You need to understand the value of recruiting diverse employees across your business lines, across your product lines, because if you do, it does have a positive revenue impact on your business as well.
Hmm. You know, and really driving these initiatives, and an organization makes a decision to really get on board. I mean, is this a top down dynamic, or is this a bottom up dynamic? I mean, where do you see that? And chicken and egg. I mean, but where does the energy to initiate and sustain? Where does it really need to come from?
That's a great question. It's still going to be top down. The top leadership. I sat in a position of power in corporate. I sat on those leadership teams. Okay, the direction has to come from leadership, but you just can't preach. You can't bury your head in the sand. The top leadership has to make a commitment. It's not just about hiring another diversity and inclusion manager. It's not. It's about having a strategy that supports these critical areas. Now, with that said, it has to be a mergence of the two. Now you have to invite your employees to be involved in the process. It's not just top down where say, here's what we're going to do, now do it. But now you have to listen to your employees. You have to empower them in this area, because trust me, once they feel like they're empowered, that they can make decisions within reason, um, you're gonna find a much more positive impact throughout the organization. One other thing I want to say is, if you have a diverse senior leadership team, according to the Boston Consulting Group, you have the potential of achieving 19% more revenue. Think about that. If you have a diverse team as opposed to just having a homogeneous team. So there are statistical data which would suggest that if you have a diverse team, you have the opportunity of increasing your revenue as well.
Wow. And this is going to test, I mean, a leader does that. It's going to test the very culture of that organization, right?
Yes,
I mean,
it is.
this is a a make or break moment. And it's not just about that agenda, but it really is all the trust, the culture, the relationships over the last how many years that have built up to that in this moment of trying to move the organization forward, right?
And absolutely, you have to challenge the organization. You have to challenge the culture. And right now, I think that's where the significant change is going to have to take place. We have to have, Dan, you said you're passionate about this. We have to have hard conversations. We can no longer sweep it under the rug and say, okay, thanks, we appreciate it. Let's go to another train. It's not another training seminar. It's not another training session. It's truly where people have to listen. They need to sit down face to face and have those hard conversations. Mark, where's Dan coming from? Dan, where's Mark coming from? I never thought you felt that way before, Dan. Mark, I didn't know you felt that way. And once we begin to break down those barriers and have those thoughtful, intense, uncomfortable conversations, then we'll make change. If we don't do that, we're gonna have this conversation 20 years from now, 30 years from now. It's gonna keep repeating itself year in and year out. So yes, we have to look at the organizational culture as well.
Yeah. So in some of these, some of the challenges and solutions, are in some ways are outside of the, like some of the issues are big outside of a scope of a single business or multiple businesses. What about collective impact? Do you think there's such thing? Do you think organizations coming together, community organizations come together, do you think collective impact is possible in making some broader changes in policy and society?
Absolutely. And in fact, I think that's part of the challenge is I would love to see organizations come together. I understand from a business standpoint, we want to generate revenue. We got profit to turn back to our stakeholders and shareholders and entrepreneurs are trying to figure out how to grow their businesses as well. But it's okay. Yes, collective impact is okay. It's okay for nonprofits to come together. It's okay for organizations to come together and break down those silos and, quite frankly, have an open and frank conversation about this, because that's another way you begin to affect those changes in attitude, is by having those deeply rooted, deeply necessary conversations. So it's okay for us to come together and again, continue to get the dialogue and have these heartfelt conversations as well.
Yeah. What are the next 90 days hold in store for our region and our country? Where do you think this movement is headed?
Well, obviously, and we're in a major election. This is not a political discussion. So one of the key priorities is just encouraging people to vote.
Right.
Okay, we want to certainly just encourage everybody to vote, no question about that. Number two is to understand from a business standpoint, we are in challenging times right now. We cannot sweep this under the rug, the conversation that you and I are having. What I would encourage organizations to do, if you have not done so right now, is to have these heartfelt, challenging conversations. Okay, it's incumbent upon that you work with your leadership team, you work with the other employees, your peer groups, schedule some meetings. You have to encourage your employees to talk. You cannot also punish them for talking. You have to be able to do it respectfully, encourage them to participate. There should not be any repercussions right now. And it's okay to ask them for their ideas. So over the next 90 days, I would strongly encourage us to take a deep breath, come together, have thoughtful conversations, because we still have a long ways to go, not just in our region, but across the country in this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, and let me throw one final one at you here before we get you on your way. I mean, how will we know? How do we measure success? What are some, and what are some first steps? First steps in measuring success, and how will we know when we've seen an impact or critical change happening? Mark, what's your definition of what to be looking for and to be really striving towards?
As with any organization, you have to start with that strategy, and the strategy has to be more than just words. It has to be actionable, and you have to have key metrics. So I would encourage all of us to go back and look at our key metrics in this space. It's not just a question of increasing from 5 people to 10 people. Well, that's not what this is about. We're talking about, you can measure employee engagement surveys, for example, and talk about a shift in attitudes. You can also measure in terms of revenue as you begin to recruit a diverse segment of the population, a diverse set of employees. You can tie that into your overall revenue as well. But more importantly, you have to hold people accountable. And we have to figure out, quite frankly, how do we weed out the bad apples? That's a hard conversation.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a very difficult conversation. And somehow you have to tie that into the metrics of the organization. So my final comment on that would be, organizationally, go back and review what's important to your business, and then incumbent upon you to come up with the right metrics for your business to somehow attain that level of success, achieve that level of success.
Yeah. Any occupations, trades, sort of pop for you, Mark? Like, look, there's just not enough representation in X, Y, Z occupation trade. What pops for you where we really need to double down?
Well, that's a great question. A lot. I mean, I still like to see us at the senior level, quite frankly, have more people breaking that glass ceiling. It's getting there, irrespective of the industry, but we have to continue to get people to break that glass ceiling. And that's not just with one industry, that's with all industry. I can tell you historically, there have been a lot of challenges, not here in Detroit, we're very fortunate, but out west in the technology space, they're having significant challenges with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, I'm not going to list any organizations. You can do your own research. It's been publicly documented. They need to do some work in the technology space, because a lot of people feel left out of that space. There's still a gap in terms of people of color, people having access to technology, and it's statistically proven that certain segments of the population don't necessarily have access to technology, or they may have access, they just don't have it. And it's also a reflection of the leadership out in those types of organizations. So the biggest area, one of the biggest areas in that technology space defined as how do I say it respectfully, Silicon Valley. That's the example.
Yeah. Mark, hey, I really appreciate taking the time for being with us today. I really appreciate the frank conversation. It's been a pleasure. I'll remind our listeners, thank you for joining in with us today. And a rebroadcast, complete audio of this will be available online later in the day here at the Chamber. So again, Mark, my thanks for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
All right, my friend. Take care.
All right.